How y'all doing? Paris Blockchain Week, what is this, day 69? Feels like day 68 or 69. I'm Jordan French, out of New York, Grit Daily News, and also the publisher at Block Telegraph. Love coming back out to see you all. Love doing events, love moderating. In that vein, we have an awesome panel with us, so I'm going to pull them right up. Iana Dichimova is here with us from OpenPaid. Come on up, Iana. I'm going to give you this chair.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Sam Buxton is with us. Sam Buxton from DomX is here with us. Just grab a mic there. Ali Arhat from ARF is here. Grab that. And then Constance Wang. Constance, so when Constance comes back to us, just push her out. Yes, but Constance is in the VIP. She's in the VIP area. Very busy. A lot of meetings and payments she has to do. She's make a lot of payments. We can talk about her just a little bit. She showed us some artwork. She was in Senegal. Yeah, she was in Senegal on the continent of Africa. I'd asked her. She's like, "Oh, I'm in Africa," and then she said, "I asked where." It was a big continent, which will come up in just a moment. And she said, "Oh, in Senegal," and she said, "I bought some art," as you do in Senegal, right, Iana? And it was impossible for her to pay by credit card, right, Sam? And she had to pay by crypto, which is something that I think all of us have done at some point. And so if I could just get a really quick raise of hands, how many of you, we were just talking about you, Constance. Big round of applause for Constance Wang joining us from FTX. Just a real quick raise of the hands while she makes sure her mic's on. Do a little mic check. If I could get a raise of hands, who has paid for something using cryptocurrency in this crowd? So don't be shy, just raise, you can raise your hands. Yeah, we can all do that too.
Test.
Not everyone. Not everyone.
I don't think any. Oh, okay.
Test.
Okay, we can hear you. We already thanked the AV people. That's why these things work. Otherwise, it gets really choppy. So a great segue, Constance, just to fill you in. We were talking about your trip that you just had to Senegal, and you bought 2 pieces of art. You showed us the artwork, and you purchased with crypto. I just did a raise of hands. It's only maybe half of the crowd that has purchased something via cryptocurrency. But pick up the story where I just left off, because one thing I didn't get to ask you yet is if you use stablecoins, for example, or some of the crypto, can you describe the transaction that you used to buy the art in Senegal?
Sure. It was we were on a topic about payments. For sure, we're on the payment panel, and I was in Senegal a month ago, and for some business trips. And after I'm done with all of my meetings, I really love arts. I want to see some African arts, so I went to one of the oldest gallery. It was actually pretty big gallery, and when I'm trying to check out, there's no credit card. I mean, they have this credit card terminal, but it doesn't work. So I didn't really know how to pay for that. They were like, "Oh, we can accept digital money if you have that." So that, and they are open for Bitcoin and USDC. I was like, "Oh, how about USDC and also Tether?" So, but of course, I like USDC a little bit more. So that's how I pay for those 2 pieces of arts, and it really blew my mind away because in Africa, wherever I go, credit card doesn't work, and I have to either pay back cash or digital money. So other than crypto, they have other mobile money where you just scan each other's QR code and money is immediately at your mobile. And I was buying something on the street, and my African colleagues were helping me on that. They just literally pulled away 2 phones and was like, "Oh, cool, this is my QR code and my money is in your phone right now." And it's like so fast, and that's like the perfect infrastructure for crypto, where if you just connect those QR code to a wallet, then you can just immediately use crypto. So that's what's inspired me to really look into emerging markets such as countries in Southeast Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, where their traditional finance system is not as strong as developed countries, and the local currency is not as strong as the developed countries. And especially for Africa, they were left out for the entire, credit card payment decades because they were not there yet. So now they literally loop in for a decades from like banking to digital money or digital assets.
Right, certainly, and I think that lays a lot of great foundation constants, because we'll get in a little bit later some of the things that FTX is doing, what you're doing specifically. But lays some really great foundation for our mindset, because it's often what I would describe as a rather Western audience. We've very built up institutions here in France. It's easy to have the opposite experience, as demonstrated by my raise of hands. A lot of people haven't needed to use cryptocurrency, and especially stable coins like you did. So thanks for answering that question of how you did it. We don't confront that, but most of the world probably does. So just to unpack that a bit more, and Ali, I'll bring you into this with ARF specifically. I was hoping you could describe some of your own experiences in Turkey specifically, so I know a lot of that contingent is here, and see if we can bridge that into explaining some of the specific things that you're doing.
Sure, of course. In Turkey, we have this. We started ARF in 2019, and in Turkey, there was this problem very similar to that, but in a way, the acquiring bank and the issuing bank of the credit cards does not know each other, and sometimes you get this kind of problems. And we were thinking about, we are all four co-founders are Bitcoin maximalists, and we think that, hey guys, let's develop a technology for Bitcoin and let it compete with Visa network, MasterCard network. So we can develop this technology to make payments in Bitcoin feeless and instant. How can we do that? Then we developed the technology, published a paper. It's a layer 2 Bitcoin technology. And it's very similar to Strike right now in the US. And we provide a white paper, we presented it, and it was great. I mean, we have the app, people are using it. It's very, very nice. But at the end of the day, we noticed that we are only talking to a certain limited community who understands, knows Bitcoin, and who can really work with that, and okay with all the fluctuation. And after some time, we also see that the main problem we saw between the two worlds, the traditional finance world and new finance world, I can say that's one thing that the other one is punk listening, new age kid, and the other things that it's a very, I mean, let them have their time, and we'll come to their place. So we start building a bridge between them. So we are helping them to work each other in a fully compliant way. So ARF transformed to a settlement network in cross-border finance payments, which help licensed money service businesses make settlements in all around the world with each other.
Right, and so you make a point here. I just want to unpack it for the audience so that we're all following very clearly, and perhaps we can do it with numbers. The payments market globally is enormous. It's around the what mark?
It's incredible. The payments industry is $2 trillion only in revenue, not in volume, only in revenue. And when you look closely, there is $4 trillion locked capital in cross-border, not in cross-border, but in all global payments industry. If you look at cross-border, the revenues are tens of 2 trillion. It's $200 billion revenues, and locked capital is also very, very similar. So at the end of the day, you can say there is this huge need for current traditional financial system, not only banks, but licensed money service providers neobanks, e-wallets, remittance companies, FX providers, and all these kind of licensed players to see cryptocurrencies, digital assets, and stablecoins, and see an opportunity for them to lower their costs and have this pre-funding and capital needs better for them, creating better opportunities for them.
Right, certainly, and just unpack that just a little bit more, and repeat this back to you. Of that, 2 trillion in just revenues, you said there's also 4 trillion. These are huge numbers in locked capital. A contingent of that is crypto that's locked up. In other words, there's not ramps into the sort of traditional or centralized banking system, which we'll get to in just a second. And there's a relationship that you're working on at ARF specifically in getting banks that technology so that they can access that capital.
Correct. I mean, for example, JP Morgan is built a network of 400 banks running on stablecoins, making them have settlements easier. So we are building this payment network, you can say. It's very similar to a global settlement bank for EMIs, neobanks, or licensed money service providers. But the crypto or blockchain technology, along with the digital assets and stable digital assets, provided a huge opportunity to move the money in cross-border in real time, along with the information. Before that, the only information was provided in real time, like SWIFT. SWIFT is an information layer, and all the money moved in settlement banks, in correspondent banking, later in intraday, later day. But via blockchain and digital assets, now there is this huge opportunity for banks, for licensed MSBs, also to move the value to a local corridor or country.
Certainly, and Yana, Ali just mentioned a huge opportunity for banks. It sounds like one, but it also sounds like they already have and own that market. So this looks like this now years playbook that's playing out of the crypto native sort of creeping in on their business. Should banks really be paranoid about what Ali, and also from her own experience that she detailed, Constance described?
Yeah, I mean, there are two ways of looking at it. You can say that that's a huge opportunity for banks, but you could equally say that that's a huge challenge for banks. And I think the majority of the banks are still very much in the second bucket, where they are really getting paranoid. And the reason why banks are getting paranoid is because it comes down to the mass adoption. So if I take Constance's experience, it really comes down to the fact that users, consumers, every one of us is utilizing crypto and is able to pay, and very often faster, more secure, more cheaply with crypto. So I think it starts with the mass adoption. It starts with what consumers expect, and then translates into what businesses are asking for. And anecdotally, I can tell you, I was at the Bitcoin 2022 summit, in Miami last week, and we got a number of very large businesses, marketplaces in transportation, healthcare, etc., coming and asking how we can actually provide a payment service that is Rails agnostic. What does that mean? In practice, it means allowing Constance to choose whether she wants to buy her piece of art through a Visa MasterCard, through a bank wire, or through payment initiation open banking that's popular in the UK, here in Europe, or through using the blockchain. So yes, banks are absolutely paranoid about this, because a big portion of the value and the volumes and the revenues that Ali was referring to is now sitting outside of their ecosystem.
It's certainly, and it's worth asking, inquiring minds here. I think you all want to know this too, but I do. Who all here has a background in banking? If I get another raise of hands, I promise I'll only do like 2 of these. I know we're guilty. We just keep them up. I just want to. I promise we're not picking on you. But and there's some here, and I think it's important to have this conversation.
I'm actually very, very surprised to see so few hands in the room, because what I'm noticing more and more, especially in the larger market players, whether it's FTX or Crypto.com or the other larger companies, is that they're building more and more that regulatory muscle, and that muscle coming from people with traditional financial services payments background experience.
Yeah, certainly. I've seen a lot of hiring reported on it. to a block telegraph and grid daily, that's for sure. Just poaching is probably a more apt way to put it. But we won't escalate this. What we will do is focus on something specific that Constance said. And that she used USDC. I think I heard that right. You didn't want to use USDT.
No,
wanted to
no,
use USDC,
I didn't
right?
want to use Bitcoin because I always
Yes.
want to keep my Bitcoin.
Right, which brings us to Sam, because those uninitiated on Damex, his company, they've been doing payments in stablecoins and focus on stablecoins, I should say, for years now. So why focus on stablecoins?
Yeah, it's interesting. You guys can hear me okay, yeah? So actually just sitting back and listening to everybody here, it's been an interesting observation because we've really lined up this, what I'm about to say, well, because we've talked about the unbanked individuals in Africa.
We're literally all here for this moment right now, Sam.
You've lined it up,
Literally
man.
said
No,
that.
I'm about to knock it out the ballpark. I'm about...
You can say that out loud, too, if you want.
We haven't even prepared for this.
Right, so we've spoke about the unbanked in Africa, and largely you asked, has anybody here bought anything with crypto? There's a few hands, even fewer than bankers in the room, and I think we could easily call the audience the overbanked or the West, right? Like we don't have problems with buying something in the shop. We wouldn't have problem buying 2 pieces of art in Paris. Like there's multiple payment options. It's fast. It's secure. We trust in the system. So we are the overbanked. We spoke about the unbanked. And in businesses, there is also the overbanked and the unbanked. But in businesses, it's not necessarily segregated by jurisdiction as Africa versus the West. It's also by industry, right? So high-risk industries, low-risk industries. And you'll find that high-risk industries are largely unbanked as well. Crypto companies, of which many of you probably work in or even own in this room, you'll agree with me that you might have had troubles with banking in the future, acquiring a bank account. Okay, maybe you have 1 or 2 bank accounts, but because beggars can't be choosers, it's not like you have a variety of options out there. And therefore, to tie into what you were just saying, yes, we have been operating crypto payments for 4 years now. We transact around 150 million euros of USD payments per month, which is not big, by the way. I mean, we
Including
use
some
FTX
art.
in the background. What?
Including some art, perhaps.
No art yet. No art yet.
Art.
No,
Constance,
unfortunately.
this is still your opportunity.
Unfortunately not. But yeah, so our biggest clients are unbanked European companies that are in high-risk industries that cannot achieve obtaining a bank account.
By the way, I could equally say the same thing for traditional payments. I guess you're referring to crypto payments and I'm referring to fiat payments. So I guess the same logic applies whether we're talking bank rails, card rails, or crypto rails.
And certainly, and it begs the question, I'll go to you, Ali, on this. Is it an obstacle that there are so many options? There are so many different cryptocurrencies that you could use for payment. Some are specifically for it. Of course, there are others that people do seem to sort of buy and hold for some form of appreciation or perhaps other reasons. Right? Is that an obstacle, Ali? Or an asset?
I think it's like a Precambrian era of all this payment stuff. I mean, it's very nice to see every effort, every new design. I mean, at ARF, we have a perspective of doing these kind of things, but nobody knows at the end of the day. And I mean, there are lots of other people trying to do the same things with different designs. So it's basically you have some need there, and you try to provide a solution to that need, and it's all okay. So I think it's a huge asset that we see this surge of different variations of different assets, different financial instruments translated into cryptos, as we talked about back in the room. I mean, we see very similar things in traditional finance, and we see the same things translated to blockchain, cryptocurrency, digital assets. I think it's a huge learning curve. I mean, today we learned that Sandwire is acquired by e-commerce payment company. So I mean, we learned a lot, and everything is so interesting. We are maybe on this very, very early days of a new 10-year or something like that.
Right. Certainly, it does sound early, and I appreciate your metaphor, so I'm going to run with it. For Constance, in regards to FTX and Ali's primordial petri dish of cryptocurrencies that he just described, it would seem that payments is in fact a distraction. For those uninitiated on FTX, it is Sam has done a killer job of, sort of going hyperbolic, right, parabolic rather, onboarding a lot of people who want to trade crypto, some who had never before owned any. It would seem like the thesis would be to keep it on the platform and not necessarily use it. It looks like a distraction, but unpack your thesis, Constance, and explain why payments would be important to what is already a very successful trading platform that is FTX.
So I think payment. Is one of the key areas we identify to push forward crypto mass adoptions. So now we look at crypto community, we think it has grown tremendously. But if you compare the crypto users to the traditional finance instrument users, it's actually a tiny little fraction of it. And the monies in crypto is like a tiny drop compared to the traditional financial market. So we think it's still a long way to go. Of course, we've built a successful trading platform, but what's the next? We want more people to actually use crypto, not only trade, because we either hold it, buy it, sell it, or trade it is like one way of.
But what's wrong with that? I'll answer your question for you. It would be, rhetorically, or not so rhetorically, you would want a bigger trading platform. Why not focus on what you do really well?
So we have to acknowledge that some different people want different things. If we want to be one of the biggest crypto companies, or we are aiming to become one of the biggest companies, we're leading platforms, we just remove crypto. You can't just target crypto people. And what we do constantly is to push crypto to non-crypto crowd, which including doing educations, implement payments, which is a easier concept for them to understand rather than, hey, come and trade crypto, which they will feel far-fetched. But payment, for example, we have credit card, FTX Pay, and we have FTX cards. So by implementing crypto into that card, they can just tap and pay. It's basically what they have been doing with their Visa cards, but now they just have to be accepting that there's like a payment processor behind, and I'm able to link this with my crypto accounts, but I don't have to do much other than tapping the card and top up my crypto accounts, which is something that we want to do to encourage the crypto mass adoption. So we don't think that this is a subtraction from the business. I think it is part of the business for us to reach to a broader audience and to push for adoption.
It's certainly, and thanks for sharing that, because it helps us unpack the next chapter of this talk, Iana, which is actually back to now that our minds are wrapped around those outside of the overbanked, to borrow Sam's term. It begs the question: is it actually easier, perhaps, to start where fiat might be vulnerable, might be volatile, where cards, like in Senegal, perhaps are irregularly working? Easier to perhaps start there, where there's perhaps more of a need, than in the overbanked. Your take, Iana?
That's a difficult question to answer. I think
I asked.
Yeah, of course.
That's why I asked
you asked the difficult
without
questions.
without any indication of what.
But me being a lawyer by background, I can argue both ways. So I could argue that in a way, yes, the demand and the need in a way is more urgent in those underdeveloped and underbanked markets, where I guess access to traditional bank account is simply not there. Access to traditional Visa, MasterCard or credit is simply not there. And I guess the most sophisticated payment method is a mobile wallet, because as we know, in many of those markets, that's still the case. So I can absolutely see why starting there with pushing payments in those jurisdictions would make sense. Equally, however, I think we have to recognize that the level of education and I guess consumer habits in those well-banked markets that we represent here today, in a way makes the job of changing the consumer behavior and the consumer adoption easier. So I'm sorry to disappoint, but again, I can argue both ways.
So either way, that sets Sam up for the natural question to ask him, because inquiring minds, Sam, want to know from your experience. We assume that you have quite a bit of data on this, and we'll go to you on the same question, Ollie. Sam, if you could describe for us what you have seen, if you've seen any changes from that nucleus of client base that you worked with, and if perhaps there's been a proliferation or broadening of the geography really all over, perhaps not indiscriminately, but perhaps irrelevant of where people are. Sam?
Gosh, really? You're gonna hit me with that one? Okay, no, I'm joking. Right. So yeah, good question. I mean, look, we've been pitching stablecoin payments for over 4 years now, and at the very beginning, people were looking at us like we were crazy, and we used to, and we still do to this day. We say one thing: look, when you get asked if you want to be paid, when you get asked by a client if you can receive stablecoin payments or not, you know who to call. Like, come back to us, and that continues to happen. Merchants that we pitched to 2 years ago, 3 years ago, come back to us. Hey, we were just asked if we can be paid in stablecoins. Are you guys still doing that? Absolutely. Guess what? We're doing a lot of that right now. So yes, we can help you. To kind of like touch on your question, we have, I mean, the financial industry, crypto aside, is complex, and we really haven't even seen a consolidation of global payment rails as it is. It's still extremely segregated worldwide. There's different payment rails in Africa, there's different payment rails in Asia, in Europe, in the West, in the CIS regions, and all over, right? And this is not integrated, and it's not smooth. So let alone trying to integrate and create a system where now you throw stablecoins in, it just makes it even more complex with governments issuing their own stablecoins and whatnot. So it's not easy, but I can say that we've had some really cool use cases. One where, to throw in a tough jurisdiction, which is what you just mentioned in your question, we have a client that's a big German car manufacturer, and they're one of our biggest clients. They have been for 3 years now, and they purchase their steel from South America and Brazil. Now, when they make payments, to touch on how like unintegrated the current financial system is. They have euros. They need to pay for their steel. If the steel company receiving the payment wants to receive Brazilian real, well, there's 3 or 4 correspondent banks that money needs to touch before the manufacturer gets his money. So what we do is we receive the euros, we buy USDT, USDC, we send it to the manufacturer who has local rails on the ground. He gets it in, I don't know, 20 minutes, like an ERC20 or a Tron payment. The local manufacturer has his money, and the steel is settled, or whatever that logistical process is. But just to think, like, you don't have to go through the bureaucracy of dealing with a couple of correspondent banks in different regions of the world where payments get lost, mixed up, T+4 settlements, FX fees, and whatnot. These guys are getting the money in 30 minutes now. Now that's the power of stablecoin payments in difficult jurisdictions.
And certainly, I'm surprised we don't get a round. There is a round of applause out there
That's
for you
me.
on the 30
That's
minute.
for me, man.
On the 30-minute note, and going back to answering the question of are you crazy, and they pose you that. All I heard was yes. That's what I heard from this whole from your soliloquy. I'm obviously kidding. I'll reel that one back. But certainly on this note, just develop this a little bit further, just for both of you. And I'll bring in this Ali in just a moment. But Sam, are they now holding those who perhaps thought you crazy, or those who don't, like this automotive maker? Certainly they're using Damex, and same for the steel company in Brazil. Are they holding now like a reserve, right, like a treasury of crypto, or are they really just using it as the sort of like the the whoop section of the bicycle race as an onboard and an offboarding?
Yeah, good question. So this specific company liquidates its stablecoins into local currency, but we do have companies who are more and more just holding their stablecoins, maybe yielding and making some interest on those, or they have a necessity to hold them to pay for third-party bills. The Brazilian steel manufacturer doesn't require to pay anybody in USDT or stablecoin, so it needs real, right, for manufacturing costs. But there is definitely a use case where clients are receiving stablecoins and then just holding them as part of their treasury, because they're going to need them to make extra forward payments. So
yeah, in some cases, probably I would imagine taxes come into play, and the other is certainly fiat volatility. Some have a bit of a slope to them, I've noticed, fiat relative to certainly crypto, but and then certainly to reserve currencies. Well, categorically, Swiss francs, US dollars, and euro dollars, yen perhaps too. Ali, your take on this and what you've observed, because there are a lot of inquiring minds that want to know about the data, right, and what you've seen and that adoption, Ali.
I think it's a great question in many answers in both ways. And I mean, we talked about the C2C part, and we talked about the B2B payments also. And my take is on of course, between licensed money service providers from all around the world. We saw that if you want to solve the problem, you have to solve it from all the journey. I mean, let's say for you cannot really provide just stable coins without providing any FX to local settlement, I mean, local currency. I mean, if it's preferred, it's okay, but you have to provide some FX, some settlement bank, or some kind of infrastructure, basically. So what we see is providing stable coins and settlement routes I mean, we are now live in 60 countries, and we have around 200 licensed money service providers in our pipeline. But we understand that we have to have a liquidity option, liquidity providing option to that MSBs. So we launched a credit line with the support of Stellar, and the idea is per transaction we provide a working capital credit line in stablecoin for all MSBs. So if you don't, there is this locked capital I mentioned, and if you don't have any money and you don't want to pre-fund right away, because I mean, if you don't have any money in your account in ARF, then you can start easily via APIs, use that credit line per transaction, and it will be settled in real time to the payout partner for that transaction. And we see huge demand. I mean, we already sold out all the facility, and we are looking for more, because I mean, in money service business, if you are successful and you become more successful, you need more capital. And that's, I mean, I'm trying to say in the essence, I'm trying to say it's not only one technology, one blockchain rail or a protocol. It's a whole system you have to solve and understand and bring together.
But you brought up a new problem, and so that we're all following along. You mentioned we were all listening very carefully, Ali, and you said that you sold out your credit line facility. You sold out. That's not necessarily a good thing. It's a good problem for you to have, but that does imply that there isn't more credit line available through your relationship with Stellar, at least for now. It then naturally begs the question, do these markets, does the crypto market and those who can facilitate it, like Stellar and perhaps others in this, the primordial petri dish that you concocted for us and illustrated for us earlier, are they able to handle the demand that is so high that you just illustrated?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. No.
I mean, but it's let's say the crypto market is 2%, and the payment industry is the rest of 98%, somewhere 5% to 95%. I don't know. I mean, it's not easy to handle this kind of demand and liquidity if you find the right angle, right perspective. But I mean, we'll see. I mean, this is where it gets exciting. I mean,
this is the ARF Paradox. For those who are uninitiated on ARF, he's a famous Turkish mathematician from the 1950s. The paradox, the ARF Paradox, so goes that you must solve for this. Perhaps it's a calculus. Let's just simplify this calculus that Ali just described, which is, can the markets handle, and when and how the tools. So on that note, on that equation, and I'll go to you, Constance, just 1 second, and I'll give you a moment to think about how to solve this. We will leave 5 or 6 minutes for. Oh, I lost my timer. 5 or 6 minutes for Q&A from the audience. We got a lot of emails on this panel for questions for you guys. I know there's some that are out there. I've asked a lot of those questions that got emailed to us naturally, but we'll have a walking mic, which is literally a person walking around, so that you will get there in just a moment. I'm going to Constance, and then later, Yana, I'll give you the last word. Constance, I've given you a moment to think about this, and I know if you had another point that you wanted to add, we can go back to it. But on this constraint, your take. Your constraint that Ali described, it's called the ARF Paradox. We've just named it here. And it is that it addresses the obstacle of whether the cryptocurrency market can handle all the demand, including for, as in his example, the credit line from Stellar. To which I thought you might reply, what problem, Ali? We can solve it. Go. Your take, though, Constance.
Yep. So we actually thought about this. So the next step for crypto mass adoption is really the throughput, how much traffic crypto can bear. So, for example, I did this really simple research on for credit Visa and MasterCard. Every second, it has about 5,000 transactions going through globally. And if a blockchain, one of the blockchain is able to provide this throughput, then is potentially able to take over the entire credit card world. So far, that's why FTX works very closely with Solana. That's why one of the reasons we choose to partner with Solana closely, because they offer tremendous throughput and in a very fast speed and very low cost. So I think it is a constraint for now, but I don't think it's like a unsolvable constraint. So for sure, there's a lot more demand in the actual world compared to crypto. And especially for credit lines, I think with more institutions coming to provide more liquidities, the credit line wouldn't be a problem. But of course, there needs more regulatory clarities around that. That's why FTX is known to be very active in talking to CFTC and SEC to push forward the regulations in the US so that it could have a positive impact globally about crypto regulations in general to help institutions to come in and to provide mass liquidity to this market so that we not only solve the credit line constraints, but also we have solutions to provide high throughput, high speed, cheap transactions that could support crypto payment in the long way.
Certainly sounds like a bet on Solana. And on your note on regulation, just to be respectful where we are, we're in Paris, so certainly there's French regulators and EU regulators to talk with as well, and I'm sure they're on the list in eventuality. And we'll go to question in just one moment, but I know that people are thinking about this for you. Sam, do you see the same constraints in your own business with Damex, particularly around stablecoins, on the horizon, or are they right in front of you, Sam?
No, we use FTX, so we're good.
Okay, well, that's an endorsement there. Solana is sold, FTX is sold. So with that, we have a walking mic. We'll go to questions. If you could just raise your hand and make it really easy for a wonderful proctor to bring you the microphone, unless you're stunned in silence. If you could just raise your hands. I have at least one question here.
Hi there. This is a question for Sam. Great panel, by the way. In terms of the stablecoins that you use, do you see a development between algorithmic stablecoins, or you stick with the normal stablecoins? Don't worry, I'm have a little bit of a caveat here. I'm from a stablecoin issuer as well, so I'm just interested to see your thought process.
Yeah, good question. I mean, a lot of we traded, I guess up until about a year ago, like 95% of our volume was Tether, and it's probably 50-50 USDT, USDC now. We haven't had any requests to trade algorithmic stablecoins as is. Maybe some light UST inquiries, but I don't know. I feel like USDT, as much as it can get hammered for a question for its questionable collateral case, I think the industry trusts it. It's sustainable. Like, it still hasn't. It's sort of stood the test of time. I don't want to like burn any bridges here, but I find it hard to see personally see a future for algorithmic stablecoins. I definitely see a future for regulated stablecoins. I do like algorithmic stablecoins, and we do a bunch of yield farming within the firm, reap those rewards. But I don't know. I just, as a firm, we're all about centralized and regulated stablecoins. Yeah.
And we have time for one more question. Big raise of your hand so she can see you. There must be. I can't. Oh, there it is. Yes. I believe you're one of the. You had a banking background, right?
I am. Yeah.
Great. Now I am picking on him. But.
Cool. Just one question for Sam. Do you think in the future you'll be able to mix fiat payment and USD payment? I mean, yeah, crypto payment?
Yeah, for sure. I think that is the exact future. I think we are going into a future where, I mean, actually, let's speak about the future because this is about the future of payments, right?
We've been the whole
we
time.
have been, but I've been zoned out. I've been thinking about getting home right now. So I think the future is all about integrating crypto or stable coins and fiat, just different rails. I don't think we're going to a future where we're only stable coins. I don't see that. And particularly at Damex, for the last couple of years, we've been building infrastructure where a lot of clients use fiat currencies and stable coins already. Like if you log into Damex for Business or our Damex application, you can deposit stable coins, fiat currencies, do exchange. You can use each as collateral potentially. So I definitely see a future where stable coins and fiat currencies will be used complementary as opposed to just a single line, if you like. Yeah. Go on that. Yeah.
I just want to add a really quick note about that combination. So fiat and stablecoins, and another thing that we constantly think about is CBDC, central bank digital currencies. So with all this, I think it's a way to push for mass adoption. Just want to bring up the possibility of CBDCs because for crypto payments to be massively adopted by somewhere, you need the government support.
Yeah, comma, in the future to keep Paris blockchain week happy. Yeah, and I'm going to give you the last word and then we'll wrap up to be respectful.
Sure. I guess given, you know, the concentration of so much capital and experience and enthusiasm, frankly, about the crypto space, maybe the one last word I'd say is we all have to, I mean, the different companies and spaces that we play in, I think would be lovely if we can all focus and pause and think about how we can use the development of these new technologies and new coins for greater financial inclusion and for better, more sustainable development in the future.
Certainly.
So that would be my appeal to everyone here today.
A good note to end on. Live in abundance. Certainly, there are a lot of people who have here. We're lucky to be here. That's for sure. Privilege, perhaps, too, in a lot of ways. And to think and be aware, and I'm glad that we did that on this panel. I'm Jordan French, executive editor at Grit Daily News in New York, also publisher of Block Telegraph. That's all the time that we have. Big round of applause for Iana Dichimova. Big round of applause for yourselves out there. This is prime time, 2:50 p.m. CEST, right here today at Paris Blockchain Week Summit. Big round of applause for all the awesome team backstage. You'll never get thanked enough for all the hard work that they do, Arnaud and the team. And Luke Kerner, he was on the stage just earlier to introduce us, the MC. Way overdue. We'll never get enough praise for what he does. Big round of applause for Luke Kerner. I think about around 6 months ago, I'm going to mark him a little bit. Super connector with Crypto Mondays, and then he just is the CEO of a SPAC. I think it's the first one or first few, let's just call it that, of his crypto company. Just check that out. They're fund of funds. Dig in, go meet him. He's really, really friendly. My name is Jordan French, executive editor at Grit Daily, publisher also of Block Telegraph news outlets. So fittingly, we're going to start with some news that's not yet announced. I was really excited to see this, but Nexo's here with us. Anthony Trenchev, I think you have something physical with you. To Anthony, what do you want to share with this audience?
A little unpaid for advertising. We just announced the world's first card with partnership with MasterCard, and it's awesome because there are a lot of crypto cards that allow you to spend your crypto, but this is the first one that when you swipe it, you actually take out a loan, which is great for us crypto natives. We keep on holding our crypto. And to the overarching theme of today's discussion, this is ultimately what will bring adoption to the space. For the non-crypto natives, they would want to have the same conveniences, the same tools that are used to, so that they don't have to adapt to new realities, but come and enjoy the same things they have in the traditional world of finance.
It is certainly germane, to borrow a French word, for this topic on digital assets specifically. But just to repeat it back to you so people know the import of that, there are a lot of cards out there. People could spend crypto, but not necessarily borrow against it. This is the first time that that's possible. Okay, we got that. Awesome. And so we have more news. This is what news outlets do. Stephen Richardson is with us with Fireblocks. and I think it's going to be a great way to segue into an operability conversation, but you just made an acquisition, Stephen.
Yep. So we just acquired First Digital. They're a payments infrastructure company. For us, it's really important to think about where stablecoins and the utilization of digital assets will go. And so really building infrastructure is critical to what we do. And so the acquisition of First will really allow us to make a move in the payment space.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, we'll talk about interoperability between centralized systems and decentralized, how they'll work together, which takes me to Cyrus with Swissborg. He's right next to me. And at Crypt Daily, big round of applause for Cyrus for being here. I know we had to step in. Woo! Because we're not done. We're not done with our news. News is actually really cool. And so I was saying, just mid-sentence, Crypt Daily, we really respect where we are. And we are here in Paris. We're in France. We're not in the U.S. U.S.-centric a lot of us get. I'm at fault for it all the time, Cyrus, but something really big happened here, and specifically in France for Swissborg.
Yes, exactly. Who believes regulation is important? Raise your hand.
Important, yes.
It's important, right? So I'm super glad to announce that we're one of the first crypto exchange that is actually regulated here in France. Yes, you heard me right. We got the PSN license, so that's extremely important for us. It's great for mass adoption, and woo!
Congrats. Congrats on that, because I think that's the underlying foundation of this whole conversation. Is ultimately just to unpack this. If you don't know why you're here, this talk is on 2030, specifically 2030, and digital assets in 2030, not 2029 or 2031. We'll be in that straitjacket. But ultimately, it comes down to the mass adoption question, right? And getting beyond the, as you said earlier, Cyrus, before, getting beyond the 2% who own crypto. Before we get there, I do want to be fair to Boaz Avoltal. Any big fans of Boaz Avoltal out there? Give him a big round of applause for joining us from Anchorage Digital, all the way from San Francisco. It's a hell of a flight, Boaz. And you do have some fans out there. I'm going to be fair. I want to be fair to you because I have to ask naturally, and I might know the answer. Do you have any news to share? Because we're at the hat trick at the moment.
I just want to welcome you to the world of well-regulated digital asset companies. Anchorage is the first and only federally chartered bank in the U.S. that serves digital assets, and it's going to be critically important for getting those large institutions that will get us to that mass adoption.
Awesome, and that certainly taps on the regulatory component. For those who are uninitiated on me, former Office of Enforcement attorney at one of the U.S. regulators, so super familiar with what we're doing at the SEC. And what will come up is an often obscured office, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency in the U.S., and we'll draw some parallels, some of the EU counterparts with Cyrus. But I'm going to go right back to you on this, Cyrus, to unpack that. Coming from the foundation, we'll go to the interoperability conversation in just a bit. But it's so important, and just to lay some foundation, it's worth challenging. Why is mass adoption so important? It seems like everyone's doing well here. Why should we care?
I mean, it's always that, right? Like, who knows where we're sitting? Does anyone know where we're sitting? Anyone? What is this place? Yeah, over there. What is it? Stock exchange. Does someone know when this was built? 300 years ago. 300 years ago, wealth management was for what? 20 people? Maybe 30? 300 years later, is it for how many people? 5, 6, 7, 8%? Right? How do you make sure that blockchain is an underlying technology that could serve people to invest, use as well to play with it, earn with it, but as well to create a new society where you could essentially govern it? I think so. This is really why we're here today. A lot of people don't believe that the blockchain technology is something that could create a system where we could collaborate all together to make a better and a more fair place. And this is exactly what many of us are doing here on the panel here, is providing this infrastructure, these applications to bring mass adoption to the world of crypto. Yeah.
Certainly. Thanks for that, Cyrus. And Boaz, I'm going to go to you and then Stephen on this topic. So one thing, especially at the pedestrian level, but even in a lot of the echelons of the crypto native community, not all cryptos created equal. There's more than just the retail trade.
Of course. The world of digital assets, the way that you guys interact with most of your assets today is through other financial institutions. And I don't think most of you expect the majority of people to be creating a wallet, interacting on chain. What we need is these institutions who know how to reach millions and millions of people in various different ways to create stability and mainstream adoption in crypto. One of the things that Anchorage does is creates regulatory clarity, technical safety and security, and a familiar interface for other financial institutions, big banks, corporations, hedge funds, to allow them to interact with crypto. The thing that gives us is a mainstreaming of these assets that does not take away from their core characteristics, permissionlessness, the ability to have free and open innovation on these blockchains. These two things together are what is actually going to realize the potential of these digital assets. It's going to allow people to use crypto in their day-to-day lives no matter where they are in the world.
And just to pull on that thread a little bit more, both you and Cyrus mentioned, or discussed rather, the licenses, that you very recently and somewhat recently got. But to invert that, it seems that there are a lot out there that don't have that French license, that don't have that license from the U.S. Office of the Comptroller of Currency, the obscure OCC, which certainly not obscure after this with this size of the audience. Hearing that, Boaz, why is that? Why is there sort of the other side of the ledger is so absent?
Innovation is happening really, really quickly. And innovation, one of the great things about the things that we do is innovation can get ahead of regulation and really try to make new and cool things happen. But eventually, as it reaches the masses, we want to do the things that regulation is designed for, which is protect people. Make sure that we are able to serve clients well, make sure that we are doing the right things by everybody that's involved, and hopefully do that in a way that doesn't stifle new innovation. That's one of the things that we want to do, is set the precedent of how we do this in the right way so that future institutions can come in and interact and build on top of crypto in the way that we know that we need to in order to get beyond speculative assets into real forms of interaction and communication and coordination across the world.
Certainly, you mentioned real forms. I know you have a point, Stephen. I want to go right and dive in on this, though, on the something that we all use. And one example was Stripe that we talked about earlier. Stripe. There are other payment processors out there, and they're all centralized. We just get a quick raise of hands. Who's swiped their credit card? The last 24 hours. Any type of credit card? Yeah, just literally put your hands up. Don't be shy. Yeah, it's a good number. Okay, we're getting. They're timid, but. Over here, either that or they're really listening, Stephen. They're about to listen to what you're about to say. And I do want to go to the point that you're going to make, but can you unpack that for us? So this conversation broadly is on that infrastructure bit. It's not so simple. It's just connecting things, like plugging them in.
Right. So, I think to the point that we have, right, we're an infrastructure provider. We're not a regulated financial institution. We think there are people that do that really well. Our job is to think about where do we think the market is going and what's the technology evolution that needs to be there. So from a payments perspective, if you look at the way the world is working, is most of you probably own a wallet. You either own a Zengo, a Ledger, some device, or you use Fireblocks if you're lucky, or another institution, right? At the end of the day, those things are distributed, decentralized, and operate on their own, right? In the case of Visa, MasterCard, Stripe, et cetera, right? They built centralized systems that, in essence, have scalability due to their centralization. So the question that we really think about as you think about the movement towards stablecoins and more adoption of those and commercial bank money being in stablecoins is how do you connect those two ecosystems to build a scalable system, right? And that's where we looked at the acquisition of First, and that's where we think about things from a infrastructure perspective. Now, that being said, there are institutions, banks, other regulated institutions that then need to take the technology that we develop and apply the proper frameworks to then have it get to the level of mass adoption that's needed to be safe for consumers to be able to use. And we have to think about where the innovation is going in the market and how fast that's occurring to make sure that we're ahead of the curve, such that when these institutions are ready to then adopt these technologies, they're able to do so at scale. So that's where we play, and infrastructure providers like ourselves and others are critical in making sure that when the time is right and when the use cases then make themselves available, they're able to be adopted at mass.
Yeah, certainly, speaking at mass, I think one of the underlying themes here is that 2030, it's even closer now than when we started this panel. You at Fireblocks and you with Anchorage Digital are much more infrastructure, maybe back end, I could call them, or purely B2B plays. One theme there, though, is that you could reach Cyrus's mass adoption without necessarily wholesale everyone literally knowing that they're necessarily blockchain enabled. And to bring Nexo and Anthony into this conversation, first, thanks for showing us the card. If you did earlier, you did, right? You did, yeah. So it's
shameless self-promotion.
Well, it's shameless self-promotion for MasterCard. They're shockingly looking very forward-looking, at least insofar as their propensity to use the blockchain, right? So speaking of usage of blockchain, I see Crypto.com here. It's a big, they're a sponsor. Cyrus on his app is 650,000 on what I would call like a retail level of people who use his app. But specifically, one thing that they're doing is something that at least a decent contingent in this audience evangelize, and it's hodling. But I'm wondering, Anthony, if hodling is actually not necessarily the right thing to do in all cases, and it's to use the blockchain, use cryptocurrency to do things. Your take?
Yeah, I mean, all of the above. You can hold all your cryptocurrencies and do a bunch of stuff with them. Historically, holding your crypto for prolonged periods has fared incredibly well, just from alpha generation and returns. We all know Bitcoin is this asymmetric asset that has delivered gargantuan returns. So, going forward, hopefully that will continue to be the case. And, that's just why we work so hard on developing auxiliary tools and services around this philosophy that we have, hodling within our bubble that we live. And quite frankly, we are living in a bubble a little bit. A lot of people are not in on this yet. But, this brings back to, the ability to interact with your assets, whether it's borrow, whether it's earn, all those services that allow you to even hold for prolonged periods. Now, this doesn't solve a lot of the problems that blockchain set out to solve, the decentralization versus centralization problems. They're ever more relevant now that the metaverse is upon us. To me, it's terribly important, and probably in 2030 will be even more so. How the metaverse is built out. Is it going to be a corporation that is going to control it, whether it's Meta, whether it's Google, whoever, or will the guys from the bubble prevail and build out these decentralized platforms and worlds in which the virtues of blockchain technology will be exemplified and have some real life applications? Because right now, it's great to hold Bitcoin, you can transfer value, it's great in hash inflation, but your day-to-day, you're unlikely to be doing in crypto still. And I think this is also one of the larger themes that is going to be important, the mean of exchange. And last but not least, we got to start thinking of crypto as our accounting unit. I'm starting to thinking of spending Bitcoin rather than dollars, and it's a very different mind shift in me personally. A little bit all over the place, but I see at least two guys wanting to jump in. So,
and certainly on that note, it's you reference the US dollar, so I'll pick on it. And it is looking awfully inflationary lately. Right after this, I'm going to go. Well, first I'm going to go to Cyrus, and then
if I could just chime on what Anthony is saying. I mean, everyone here has Bitcoin, right? Raise your hand. The people who don't have Bitcoin, there's no purpose standing here, guys. So go buy some Bitcoin on Swissport, please, okay? Second thing, the people raise their hands. Whoever has paid anything in Bitcoin, raise your hand.
And who hasn't regretted it?
And that's where the dangerous part is. So, for example, my dad is based in Iran. Every month I send Bitcoin, Ethereum, and now USDC because it's slightly easier, okay? I pay for his dental surgery 3 weeks ago in Bitcoin. And that's what you have to be doing, is how to use essentially this blockchain technology. If it's just for hodling, that's only the first step. You have to make the yodeling. So Swissborg, where a lot of people are Swiss, so we say that yielding is great, right? Yeah, yielding is great, especially if it's used on Aave, on Compound, if it's used on Anchor, it's on different other DeFi products where you could use the technology behind it. If you're just putting it on your ledger, it's a great first step, but you have to really make sure that you're yielding. Obviously, to yield is not that easy, right? All the DeFi protocols today, there's some great ones, there's some shady ones, and there's some that will, explode eventually. And that's where you need to look at who are the right players that are bringing mass adoption. And today, who's over 70 years old in the room or 60 years old in the room? Anyone over 60?
I don't know if I'll have many volunteers for that.
There you go. Congratulations, ma'am. So you're over 60. I think so. This is what we're doing really on our platform is that every month we have 100 users that are over 80 years old that are depositing their fiats, that are exchanging this in crypto, and they're then yodeling. And this is exactly what we have to be thinking is there's always how to create an app that could bring security. With that, you have multiple different functions, such as user experience. You need, obviously, to be regulated. You need to have a core message to what you're doing. But build the right apps that could bring the next, 8 billion people to get into crypto. And I think so, all of us here, this is exactly what we're working really hard on different of these business sides, yeah.
And Stephen, to develop that further?
Yeah, I mean, I think the point was 2017, 2018, 2016, 2017, 2018. There weren't many use cases for you leveraging your digital assets, right? Like Bitcoin, and there weren't a ton of those. The idea and the introduction of stablecoins and what it can do for DVP settlement, what it can do for payments, what we're seeing around tokenization of securities, carbon credits, other green assets, gives more and more use cases for folks to actually use assets. And we're seeing a diversification of these assets across different blockchains, Stellar, Hedera, Ethereum, et cetera, right? So there's more of a use case basis for actually leveraging your digital assets and getting invested and creating alternative portfolios that I think didn't exist at a point in time. And so I think that becomes the critical basis for mass adoption in my mind. So for an example, we just worked with ANZ Bank in Australia for them to release their Aussie dollar stablecoin. And we see that as a basis for which the likes and the utilization of digital assets becomes more commonplace for a lot of retail consumers. We'll see that across that type of adoption, we think across multiple banks in the region, and we're seeing that type of adoption being looked at within Europe and the US. That basis of commonality, association with something people are familiar with, and easy infrastructure to be able to use that, then brings more adoption and allows people to get involved in more complex products and services. So I think we're making this road, like these gradual steps towards 2030 when we'll see more people utilizing these, but it's the job of people in this room to create applications and products that people can associate with common services that they use today, right? And then implement that and then manage those at scale, right? And so that's where I think the big difference is from 2016, 2017, where it's quite complicated to actually get involved in this space at all.
And certainly, Stephen, some banks are really big, but we can go bigger. Earlier this year, news came out of El Salvador, and more recently, now Honduras, going back to Anthony's point about wholesale adoption, countrywide for a particular use. We've been monitoring that really closely. A lot of news organizations have been. What's been going on in El Salvador, which has been the use of Bitcoin specifically for practically everyday purchases. So far, what we've seen is it looks like a lot of people use Bitcoin ATMs, or that's interoperable now with their bank. And it's been clunky, but so far, what looks like somewhat successful, even though it's drawn the ire of the World Bank and some of the other sort of international institutions that look certainly at fiat and rate them. Anthony, on that topic, with 2030, not even 8 years away, that in mind at the country level?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's worth just taking a step back and, just acknowledging how much the space has evolved and in what a dramatic direction. Early on it was like, oh, it's just a couple of cyberpunks and nerds using it, and then it was just these terrible speculators and companies that are looking for fundraising via ICOs, and now we're stuck with a narrative. Oh, but it's only small countries that have adopted Bitcoin, and it just speaks volumes about the size and the growth of it. And I'm absolutely certain that even earlier than 2030, we will have other countries in Latin America adopt Bitcoin as a standard, even companies such as Terra, shout out to Do Kwon for what he is doing, purchasing Bitcoin large scale and, pitching the Bitcoin standard. So there's no doubt that entire countries will adopt it, with Tesla and MicroStrategy. Pandora box is open for S&P 500 companies to follow suit. And, ultimately, I think it will be demanded by the shareholders, by the citizens, by the clients that everybody does it because it has yielded such incredible results in the past.
Boys.
I think it's great. The two things you guys brought up are two sides of the same coin. The crypto ecosystem is creating options for the entire world to take control of their monetary future and the future of their value. So whether a country is adopting Bitcoin because the Bitcoin standard is better for them, or countries are moving towards CBDCs because just the fact of the ability to transmit assets and transmit value, intraday, more often, borderlessly, in a way that is much more seamless and much more efficient. It's very nerdy to say in and of itself it's going to make huge improvements to the way that we all work in the world. All of these technologies stand alone. We bundle them all together into this one idea of crypto, but there's a lot of individual innovations that we can take out of it and apply to our day-to-day lives and the way institutions want to both participate in the transfer of value, which we see very often, or in interacting on-chain with protocols via staking and governance and DeFi, whether it's lending and financial services. Institutions have to be able to do all of these things in order to be successful, and that's one of the things that we want to be able to provide.
Cyrus.
A lot has been said. It's always hard to come after. But at the end, why was Bitcoin created? Bitcoin was created because there was a massive frustration where banks were not behaving in the right way. Bitcoin was created because there was countries that didn't empower their citizens and started to control them in certain different ways. And we see this on and on and on, right? Power, money, greed, always the same thing. And what I see the underlying technology, but that beautiful philosophy of decentralization, is how we together could create a different future, right? The institutions of the country will probably always have a play. But the more interesting part is how these different DOs, how these different communities, how we together could start forming anything, right? Any different project. You're seeing NFT projects are, coming like mushrooms all the time. Some of them don't make sense, but then eventually they make sense, right? Because you start creating a community. Always the foundation of something is to have a community, then starting to create a great mission with that, make sure there's governance system that you guys put in place, and make sure that you build the right products and the right applications for that. So for me, it's how these DOs and how these communities could get at another level. You see recently, what's the one for investing? It's the DO, BitDO, right? These guys are now reinventing, for example, VC, right? How maybe we together could all put in, chip in, few thousand to few millions, and maybe each token represents a share to vote for the next project, and how you could start incubating the best projects of tomorrow. This is where I'm very, very interested, is how, as a decentralized autonomous organization, we could reshape eventually companies, businesses, but more importantly, countries, yeah.
Yeah, certainly, and since you referred to best products, and we got this question emailed in right before the panel, to Gradelli. Inquiring minds want to know. I'll go to you on this, Anthony, and then to you, Stephen, on the same. Is the proliferation of different cryptocurrencies, and to that extent, the blockchains and sidechains, is that an obstacle to reaching mass adoption, as Cyrus has laid that foundation for 2030? Or is that a tailwind to assist that, Anthony?
It's an opportunity in disguise. I would phrase it that way. The beauty of crypto is that it's actually one of the very few free markets. With equities and traditional finance, you have these regulators, you have this buyer of last resort. The bigger players don't get to fail as they should because they're too big to fail, etc. And then the only free market is crypto. So you can have I don't know, when we started out in 2017, it was like 700-800 coins. Now it's 16,000 or something. It's a 20x growth. And I think there's beauty in that. You can start out, you can compete, you can present your case, and the market evaluates it. If you develop a good product, great, so be it. And if not, then you fail. I think there's beauty in allowing entrepreneurs to fail as well, which in traditional finance somehow doesn't appear to be the case anymore, at least for the big guys. And then, you know, at the end of the day, then you have to have the companies and the infrastructure that allow you to have this a beautiful, easy-to-use interface that simply makes it all work. Because, like, we are all about decentralization and, you know, taking matters into our own hands. But how many of you are using a Linux platform on their laptop? I see 2, 3, maybe 7 hands. Okay, and how many are on the Mac laptop ecosystem? Well, vast majority. And what does that tell you? It tells you that people want to have something that simply makes it for them work. So it's great if you have all these different asset classes, but then you have to have something overarching that simplifies the use of it all.
Make a good point on what amounts to UI, UX. Stephen?
Yeah, look, I think for us as an infrastructure provider, we think about that all the time, right? So I think the idea that people...
And you do a great job, by the way.
Thank you. I think the fact that you can choose, you know, we have banks and institutions and new funds being able to choose what blockchains they want to launch different projects on, what they want to tokenize with. That's a positive thing in the space. I think the job is to basically give people common infrastructure to then be able to hold those. I think there's a lot of work still to do, and maybe Boaz will talk about this further in terms of cross-chain oracles and all these different pieces to really make it more adaptable and easier to kind of look at information seamlessly. But I think that's where the opportunity is.
I totally agree. It's super important for infrastructure providers to be agnostic, to try to provide what it is that people are looking for. The idea of where we are technically with cross-chain, with NFTs, it's still super early days. But the thing that the reason why I like this question of 2030, 5-10 years in the future, and the thing that if you guys were here during the growth of the internet from the late 90s and you saw the proliferation of experimentation and the ways in which people tried to change the way the world interacts with each other, the thing that you can't count out is this permissionless innovation, this ability for people to solve problems independently around the world. So we don't know in a lot of ways what things are going to look like in 2030 because somebody today is, an idea is in their mind that they're going to implement in the next few years that we never even thought of.
Right, and I'm not going to let you off the hook on that though, Boaz, because I do hear this a lot, right, about, we don't know. So as, a business practitioner, and that's a lot of what this audience is the industry inside, how can they prepare? Let's take the assumption that you're right, that we don't know. What are the things that you can do to keep your door open as long as possible so that you're there at the 2030 mark?
You keep your network open, so you see what the smartest people are doing, what the people who are on the cutting edge of exploring in these industries are doing. And I think one of the things that crypto taught everybody is to remember to stay curious. If you see a lot of people really, really excited, smart people about something you don't understand, do not dismiss it. Explore it. Try to figure out what is interesting, what is the kernel of something that is meaningful about this thing, and how might it change.
Yeah, that's exactly the point, Boaz. You got it straight. I mean, if you look from the crypto assets from, let's say, 2015 to 2022, the top 10s have always changed, right? You maybe have, Bitcoin, Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP that were there mainly for the last, 7 years, but all the others has been changing and will completely change. That top 10, that top 20 will always change. And what I like to look at the crypto side. Prior to crypto, I was working a decade in the more boring stuff of hedge funds and things like that. But I had this way to break down asset classes. And what I see in crypto, the first is the payment tokens, right? Payment tokens such as Bitcoin, Litecoin. Litecoin was the biggest thing back, XRP too. Is that Litecoin and XRP is going to be the biggest tomorrow? To be honest, I have quite big dots. Is Shiba going to be the next one or Doge? Potentially, right? That could be like new interesting ones. Then you have to look at the second The second is infrastructure layers, right? So you had Bitcoin, then you had Ethereum that came in, then there's Solana that's come in, but there's going to be new ones. And it's always going to be like that because people in crypto like to flip, like to look at new stuff. And there's more important, there's new always R&D that's happening. Some scale them faster, some just have, better business case, as some have just more people that chill it, whatever reasons. We're always going to see a lot of different infrastructure that's going to come, and potentially maybe one day, one's going to take it all. But, I'll be very interested to see like how Cosmos is going to play this interoperability between chains, which might be a very interesting one. And then you have utility tokens, right? Swissborg token, Nexo token. There's a lot of different tokens that have a different usage where you get membership, you get superpowers, you get governance rights. And those, each time there's a new project, well, there's a new utility token, which makes sense, right? We just have a lot of different use cases based on the project. But make sure when you look at the utility tokens, is there a real usage? If there's governance, yes. How many people are voting on chain, right? That's a really good way to see if these things are actually being used or not. The fourth for me is security tokens. So far, unfortunately, there's not have been so many great things besides stablecoins. It is what it is because one of these different exchanges are not yet regulated and don't have sufficient capacity to offer these security tokens, but everyone, I think so. I mean, maybe let's ask, who believes in security tokens? Raise your hand. Not many people. Okay, that's funny. And
it almost sounds like religion, Cyrus, when you say, believe in. It's worth unpacking that word. What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, I think so. Is there a future for security tokens? I believe that, today having a share and like who owns shares here in the room? Raise your hand. Right? You actually don't own anything. You just have a depository within a bank that maybe has another bank that's holding your share. The day you want to move from your, robo-advisor or from your bank account, you can't move your shares. So that doesn't belong to you. So that's why we have blockchains and have ledgers and ownership of your data. So this is why I think so it's more importantly, and then obviously if tomorrow you want to buy shares, like for example, in different emerging markets, it's very complicated, like to get into it. So that's why I think so blockchain will be a great technology player that could bring in these security tokens. And the last fifth asset class for me is NFTs, right? And NFTs, such as security tokens, or probably even more, we already have billions of these NFTs, right? And why do we have so many? Is just because probably the most biggest driver of all industry going forward, listen to this carefully, is video games, guys. This industry just booming on a daily basis, on a yearly basis, and play and earn is going to be, probably the biggest industry that will bring mass adoption. We saw it with the early stage was Axie Infinity. They had over 30 million users. No other blockchain has that amount of users, and that's a very basic game. It's play to earn, what it is. But when we're getting into the real esporting, the real best games like that are just being shipped right now, this is when we're going to see this entire ecosystem grow and everyone's going to be using blockchain, not even realizing they're on it.
Riveting. Finally, I spotted the timer. I'm going to give you the last word in the interest of time as courtesy of this audience. Stephen.
Last word, okay. No, I mean, I think at the end of the day, the points that were raised here were correct, right? And so I think it's the people in the room here that are thinking through what those implications are, right? And building new services and technology applications for it, right? And that will be the basis for which we'll see kind of 2030 and more adoption to happen. So congratulations to people in the room that have developed what they've developed so far, and we're looking forward to see what's next.
And metaphorically, it's all playing the game, Cyrus, in the room. That's all the time that we have. I'm Jordan French, executive editor at Grit Daily. Big round of applause.
Thank you very much.